Nathan Knapp has been described as smudge and arrogant.
I think you mean smug.
Arrogance.
Tyler, I'm just trying to start the podcast.
And there's our smudgeness.
Hello, and welcome to Ignore the Bell. I am Nathan.
And I'm Tyler.
And if you did not catch that reference, everything in this podcast is going to go over your head, I imagine, because this is going to be about The Office, the TV series. The US TV series is what we're going to be looking at.
Yes. Yeah. And we have a very, very special sponsor for today's
I
episode.
couldn't be more excited about today's sponsor.
I know. This is just absolutely incredible. Today's sponsor is the Michael Scott Paper Company. Come for the pancakes, stay for the service.
That's what I do. I love the pancakes that are square, right?
Yeah. They don't cook evenly, but they're shaped like paper.
Right, exactly. That's really what I look for in food for the most part, is just what shape is it?
Yeah.
Does it match things I enjoy, like paper? All right, folks. So, The Office. Enjoy the show.
Oh man, I wish this discussion could go on forever.
Ignore the bell. We're gonna keep going, people. All right, so we are going to be talking about The Office for the next 60 minutes or so until the bell goes off, and probably a few minutes beyond that. So I have seen The Office, like many people, too many times. I don't know about you, Tyler.
I don't think there's such thing as too many times. It's I think I've watched through the entire series probably only twice, maybe three times. Um, but yeah, I mean it's absolutely fantastic. Like I did like the whole I didn't watch it when it was like first on TV. I caught a few episodes here or there, but I didn't get really into it. But then I just binged it on Netflix and
Right. I mean, Netflix might as well just change its name to the Office streaming service
right.
because the amount of people who just watch it just like constantly on a loop, like that's got to be a really high number.
Yeah, that and Friends. I know that Netflix got a lot of backlash when they said that they were going to be removing Friends from.
Right. I can imagine so. I can imagine so. Um, yeah. So, all right, let me give you a little bit of an overview of The Office, and then we'll get into a discussion of it. So, The Office, it ran for 9 seasons from 2005 to 2013 on NBC, and it's an adaptation of the original BBC series of the same name, which Ricky Gervais he developed. And I'm not sure if there was a co-creator of the BBC version of The Office. I don't know.
Mm.
Uh, have you seen the BBC version of it?
I think I tried to watch an episode or two. I mean, clearly it wasn't very memorable if I did, and
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's just not the same. It's not.
No, and some people I remember like that was how I was first introduced to the series is that people were talking about the BBC show The Office. This is well before, like a couple years before the United States got its own version on NBC, and yeah, and people kept talking about how it was so great. And then I tried watching and I failed in getting through it. And then I tried again and failed. And then I did manage to get through it. And some people will insist that the British version is so much better than the American version. And those people are lunatics. Um, like, and honestly, though, like where it seems to come from is there is a very strange, I don't know if we have any people who are watching in the UK, but there is a very strange attitude amongst a lot of people in North America where they basically say that the British version is always better.
Mm,
And like, you know what I'm talking about, right? It
yeah.
like
Um,
they're like, I love British humor. I love British comedy. They always say those things. Um, and then I'm just like, you don't even like comedy. Why do you insist that it's better? Because it's not people who are obsessed with comedy who say that. It's
Right.
people who say it for pretentious reasons. Like I haven't met one person who says like, "Oh, I love British comedy. It's so much better than American comedy," who isn't a pretentious jerk. Like,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean there are some enjoyable British comedies, but
of course there are.
I wouldn't say that, they're inherently better or funnier than
That's what I'm saying is like some are great, some are really, really good, some are not so good. But the people who say that, it's like the same type of people who say the book is always better. And it's like, and this is like coming from somebody who is like pretty obsessed with books, that I'm like, no, I can come up with several key examples where the film adaptation is actually better than the book. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, mostly then I think that the book is a more enjoyable experience than the film for a whole bunch of, complex reasons. But
Mhm.
yeah, no, a lot of people think that the BBC version is better, and I've got serious issues with the British version of it, which we can get into in the discussion. But it's not the same series as the NBC version of The Office, although
Mhm.
it starts out pretty similar. The
Mhm.
US version starts out pretty similar, and then it really diverges from there.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So yeah, it was so the US version though, I think that this is important to mention that it was developed by um, let me see. I think it was like co-created by
Or
Ricky
adapted
Gervais.
for American
Yeah,
television.
like yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. The American series was adapted to American television by Greg Daniels and Ricky Gervais. And so if like you and I have talked about Greg Daniels before, because I've said how I've
Yeah.
kind of followed this through line of his career and then going, whoa, all of these things that I absolutely love, this comedy, this approach to comedy that I absolutely love, then Greg Daniels has got his hands all over the stuff that I love. So in case you didn't know who Daniels is, I'm going to give you a quick breakdown. So he's a producer, and he originally, I guess he was originally on Saturday Night Live. He was, I guess, a writer for that, but he did The Simpsons, and then he did King of the Hill, and then he did The American Office, the NBC version of it, and then Parks and Recreation,
Mhm.
and let me see, because I know there's a couple other significant ones in there. And we were talking about this. One that I was actually surprised by, and you said that you've seen. What was it? Oh, that's going to bug me. It's the Wyatt Cenac show.
Oh, that's right. People of Earth.
People of Earth. Yeah.
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 Um, yeah, which I don't know how long that series lasted. I'm pretty sure it's over now. But but yeah, I couldn't really get into that one. But other than that, like Greg Daniels, uh, yeah, his career is very impressive.
Yeah. And so what I love about Greg Daniels, the productions that he's associated with, that he's produced and that he's really been heavily involved in. So early Simpsons, right?
Mhm.
Not the more recent stuff, but early Simpsons,
Yeah.
King of the Hill, The Office, Parks and Recreation, which I have just watched, by the way. So we could have a Parks and Recreation. Yeah,
Ooh,
I've watched the entire
okay.
thing, like, and I finished like last week, so we could actually talk about that.
Okay.
So that
Yeah,
might be a nice.
I've watched through that twice now, so
Oh, great. Okay, yeah. So we could legitimately do that.
yeah.
Yeah, so what I love about it is that he has got this wonderful, this remarkable ability to bring out comedy from very, very grounded, realistic situations, and that he has got comedy with heart. That there's a
Mhm.
lot of sentimentality, but it's not too sentimental, right? It's not
Right.
over the top, it's not sappy, it's not melodrama, but that you genuinely care for these characters and you see them as fully formed human beings who also are involved in very comedic situations. But the comedy comes naturally out of their characters. It's not
Mhm.
slapstick, it's not over the top. It's that you get these very well established characters, and then the things they do are just funny. Right. Like if you like watch
Yeah.
King of the Hill, like Hank Hill would never claim to be a funny person,
Right.
But just Hank being Hank is so freaking funny.
Absolutely.
Like,
Yeah.
just like, I mean, like, and honestly, like, this might seem like such a strange thing to pick out about King of the Hill, but like one of like my favorite moments in this, and I know this is supposed to be about The Office, but this is Greg Daniels who, produced
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
adapted it. Um, so like at one point, then like Hank, like you see him, he's filling up the ice cube tray, and then he's bringing it from the sink over to the freezer, and then he puts it in, and then he comes back, and then he like goes into the living room. He's talking to like Peggy and Bobby, and he's like, "All right, now I just filled up the ice cube tray, so no one jostle the fridge." Right? Something like that. And I'm like, that is the funniest thing because every single home has had that moment happen. But when have you ever seen that on television until then? That is one of those
Yeah.
phrases that every single person knows exactly what that is. And Hank would be the kind of guy who would be like, I just did this thing. Don't jostle the refrigerator. As if somebody is going to go over there and start shaking it. But even then you could see it's like, yeah, if you're not being careful, if you like you throw like the refrigerator door open and then you like swing it shut, then it's like you might really spill the ice
Yeah.
cube tray. And so it's such a funny thing because you identify with it, but you've never seen that before. It's this familiar like domestic scene that is
Yeah.
very funny.
Yeah. And that's exactly how The Office is at the very
Yes.
least at the beginning, where
Yes. Yes, at the
it's a
beginning.
very good realistic depiction of office life. Like
Yes.
I've worked in a few offices, and yeah, I definitely relate to so many things in it, and it's not necessarily like that somebody's telling jokes. It's just somebody does something, and you're just wanting to look off to the camera and just be like, what was
Right.
that?
Right. Yes. Um, Yeah, I mean, like I've had that happen so many times in my workplaces over the years where you're just like, this person was not trying to say something funny, but that was so strange and weird that is hysterical. But if I start laughing, they will have no clue why I find them as a human being so funny.
Yes.
Right? That's what's amazing about it. And that's where the comedy comes from in The Office. So this is and we've talked about this before, but part of this is kind of documenting our thoughts on this. I think that The Office is so good early on. I would say seasons 1 to 4, but especially 2 to 4. I think
Mhm.
those are the golden years of The Office as a series. And then I still enjoy later seasons, but I've got serious issues with later seasons, and I'll explain why. The Office does such a good job, especially early on, where you have got this wonderful balance between normals and weirdos. And the problem with the later series, with the series as it gets into later seasons, is that the balance of power shifts, and there
Yeah.
ends up being way, way, way too many weirdos, not enough normals.
Yeah.
So the comedy to me goes away because it's like the Poochie episode of The Simpsons where it's like you got the producer saying like, okay, so you want like a zany, wacky, out of this world cartoon that's also heavily grounded in familiar situations, right? That
Right.
like the producers are like, how on earth, what do you guys want? How do you want us to do this? And that's what they tried to do. They're like, but we'll still have that, sentimentality, those familiar scenes of office life. But it's like, but you can't. You can't because they literally have characters who were very recognizable, very realistic characters who start becoming caricatures.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And when characters become caricatures, it doesn't fit that documentary feel that the series is
Exactly.
supposed to be.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
So thank you for getting that because I really do think that's exactly it. That's the issue with The Office as it goes on. I'll still watch it because there's enough moments where I still enjoy it. Uh, but it's hardly even the same show.
Yeah.
And and certainly the last several seasons of it are hardly the same show. Although I think the last season is kind of redeems it a little bit. It comes back to
Yeah,
some
I would
degree
agree with that. Yeah.
with
Um,
Clark and Pete, then they, I think, actually
Right.
really help. I really do think that.
Yeah, yeah, no, because I mean, you definitely see both of them. I mean, they're stand-ins for Jim and Dwight,
Yes,
even
exactly.
though
Which is
Clark
very
would
like
be
it's a meta
horrified
moment
of
on
it.
the show of saying like, "Hey, we've got the new Jim and the new Dwight."
Yes, yeah, but it really is like it's almost like a soft prequel, if you will.
It is. Except the thing is, I think they actually do a better job with Clark because Clark, you can see him like they do a better job with him than they did with Dwight early on.
Mhm.
Because Clark, I can actually buy as a realistic character. So, insofar as the show is doing a mockumentary, like where it is taking all of the documentary style and features and tone, and then trying to then portray it to us as though we're actually watching a documentary, it's like, well, that only works if we're dealing with characters who feel realistic. And
Yeah.
Clark, as much as he's a weirdo, you can still see how he got the job, right? You
Yes.
can see
Yeah.
that he's normal enough that of course he could like get a job like that. The problem with Dwight is, I mean, I think the first season, then he's a little strange and we just don't know enough about him. But then as the series goes on, he becomes so ridiculously zany that
Mhm.
you're just like, this doesn't make any sense. There's absolutely no way a person like this exists or could have an office job.
Yeah, the one episode that really I don't know, to me took the wind out of the sails of the Dwight ship is the one where it focuses entirely on Shroot Farms.
Mm.
Uh, like this is in one of the last few seasons, and apparently it was made as a pilot for a show that was going to be just about Shroot Farms.
Huh.
Uh,
Interesting.
so, because like that whole community around his farm is all kind of like him.
Yep.
So, and it just, that episode to me was just like there's like nothing to do with The Office. And it just doesn't, yeah, it doesn't feel like The Office, but it also just is like, oh, well, I don't know what world I'm in anymore.
Right. And the only comedy that really comes out of that episode is the fact that you've got Oscar who's there for the funeral because
Yes.
and it's not just a juxtaposition of a normal person and then a weirdo. It's that it's a dynamic between them because it's not just like, look, there's a normal person, there's a weird person comedy. It's look at how they have to interact with each other and that
Yeah.
they are interacting on like they're having totally different experiences on this planet. They're living in basically two
Right.
different dimensions and yet they're existing within the same dimension. And if like nothing like what captures office life better than that? You know, that it's just like you have to interact with this person in a professional way and you're like, who the hell are you?
Yeah. 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 So there are so many great characters on the show. And then there are the ones that they definitely did that became more of a caricature than others.
Yeah.
Angela, I would say, is one of those who becomes quite a caricature. At the beginning, then you're like, okay, yeah, whatever. She's like, this um, kind of cat lady sort of personality, and you get that.
Yep.
But later on, when like she's keeping cats in one of the filing cabinets, and like I'm just like, what the? This is so stupid. Like, so does she bring him into work? How does nobody know that she has a cat there? Or
Oh yeah,
uh,
I mean, like, there's that, and I mean, the moment for me with Angela, where I'm just like, this is just so ridiculous, and like, you have gone so far from established, like her as an established character, is when after it was a couple seasons after the duel between Andy and Dwight, then she talks about this like moment in her life where she's like, yo, I had these two guys, they were both in love with me, and then they had a duel, and then Oscar's like, yeah, we were there, Andy and Dwight. She's like, no, this is a different time. And he's like, you've had two different situations in your life where you've had two guys dueling over you. And then she's like, yes. And I'm like, but that's not her at the beginning of the show.
Yeah.
She was leading a very cloistered life. As
Yeah.
I mean, the show established that pretty clearly, and she was also incredibly Christian, and
Hmm.
uh, a conservative Christian woman. And then you see her with this relationship that she has, like having the affair with Dwight multiple times. That she's got the affair with Dwight while she's engaged to Andy. Then she's got the affair with Dwight while she's didn't she?
Married to the senator. Yeah.
Yeah, wasn't that going on too, as best I
Yeah.
remember?
I
And
believe so. Yeah.
and so, I mean, you look at that and you're like, well, that's not who she was before. Who she was before, I could buy that like as a realistic person, right?
Yeah.
Somebody who's very uncomfortable with all of the strange people in the office because she's had a pretty sheltered life, and then she becomes a
Right.
caricature. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, get her to do that because it'll be funny, and it's like, but is that does that keep with her character?
Yeah, because she was like as you said, very cloistered. Like she would not talk about her home life or
Right.
anything, and then yeah, she just started like going on about like oh, the senator and I and whatever, and it's just like I don't know. It felt so much, and I mean like part of that is because she's trying to like rub it in Dwight's face or whatever, but again, like that's not her.
No, she became there's multiple characters on the show who became something else. So let me try to like establish this because this, I think, very early on, you've got almost a perfect balance between normal people, like normal characters on the show, and complete weirdos. And so let's try to keep track. Like I'm going to need some help with this, but I think
Sure.
early on, then if we go through the normals, then you say Jim and Pam absolutely are normal characters.
Yeah,
Are you going to write this down?
I am.
Okay, good. Yeah, okay. So on the one side, you've got normal characters early on in the series, Jim and Pam.
Yeah.
You've also got Oscar, who's a normal
Hmm.
character. Phyllis is a normal character.
Yep.
Stanley is a normal character.
Yep.
Toby is a normal character.
Hmm.
Okay, so I would say it depends on how early on in the show we're going. Let me just try to go with the obvious weirdos, though.
Yeah.
Dwight is a complete weirdo.
Hmm.
Michael is a complete weirdo.
Yep.
Um, Kevin is a complete weirdo.
Yes.
Creed is a complete weirdo.
Oh, Creed is the worst.
Meredith is a yeah, and Meredith is a complete weirdo.
Yeah.
And then I mean, I think you do start to see this not that far into the like season 1 with Kelly, they had no idea what they were doing with her. She was basically
Mhm.
Angela, but like an Indian Angela where she's got like this very like, and I say Indian in that like because of her family and growing up, then it's like they're trying to present her as somebody who's grown up in a very traditionally Indian household where her
Yeah.
parents have got a lot of say over her own personal life. But then it's like she becomes something totally different pretty soon after that. But
Yeah.
you've basically got Kelly, who's a weirdo, I would say, and Ryan, who's normal. Because Ryan is pretty normal early on. Until he goes to corporate, he's a normal character.
Yeah.
He's a normal person. So you see what I'm saying? How it's like that's almost perfect. I'm trying to think of like what characters do we have that I haven't mentioned where it's like, ooh, where do they go? Like Angela, I guess.
Yeah.
I would put her more on the normal side early on, although she is a bit of a weirdo. I don't know. She's kind of right in between, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you definitely do have characters who don't quite who have peculiarities, but who are not, outright weirdos.
Right. Right.
But yeah, like all of them, then their peculiar traits just get thrown way out of proportion. Like, yeah, just become how you define those characters as opposed to a
Yep.
portion of their character.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
yeah.
So
Uh,
where are we at then? How many do we have on one side compared to the other?
three, four, five, six, seven, uh, eight normals and six weirdos.
Yeah. And then, so if we're following this through, then as the series goes on, who on the show is still a normal? You've still got, can you do a new list? Because
Yeah.
Okay, so a new list of this. Jim and Pam remain normal.
Yeah.
And Toby does, and then he doesn't. Like by the end of it, he becomes really strange.
Yeah, he's strangely obsessed with Pam, and
The
yeah,
Scranton
and
Strangler, when he starts getting into that.
yeah,
This whole thing of he wants to be a writer, like in the last season of it, then it's like he goes to New York and he lives with like these guys. You know what I mean? And like
yeah,
his strange obsession with Nellie. It's like, and it even comes up at one point in the show. Then it's saying like, oh, Toby's been checked out since January. There's that one episode where like Oscar's talking about this of like, I forget exactly the terms that he uses, but basically like the sane versus the crazy in the office, like the balance goes all out of whack.
yeah.
Because, but I think like Toby becomes like, I don't think he's normal enough to remain a normal character. But I'm trying to think like, who do you have beyond Jim and Pam who remain pretty grounded?
Pete.
Pete, but like he doesn't come until the last season. But yeah, I mean, you
Yeah,
can say Pete.
yeah. No, I know. I'm trying to think of others, and yeah, um, I mean, maybe Oscar. I don't know.
I know Oscar at times remains normal, but then he's got some kind of zany moments.
Yeah, yeah.
Like his
Um,
whole thing with, him and the senator
mhm.
that I don't know. He
Yeah, it's very. I don't know what happens there. Um, Ryan it becomes a complete weirdo.
Yep.
Angela, as we described, becomes a weirdo. Stanley, maybe.
He
No.
remained normal for a very long time, and
Hmm.
then he started becoming stranger and stranger as the series goes on. I would say he stays normal for a pretty long time, but by the time
Yeah.
they go to Tallahassee, then he becomes this very weird. Like once they started in with the affairs, and it's like, oh, I'm going to continue having all of these affairs, and
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
but it wasn't he wasn't a realistic character anymore. He
Yeah.
became this strange like horn dog.
Yeah. He was also very inconsistent. You had him, still doing his crossword puzzles or whatever. Even when they had, the guy who came in to, you know, take over temporarily for Michael. I forget what that character's name is. Um, the, the guy who took over during the Michael Scott Paper Company. Uh,
Oh yeah,
uh,
Charles.
yes,
Charles.
Charles. Yeah. So I mean, I get that Stanley likes his puzzle, but like if there's a new boss, I don't buy him, still doing his puzzle like in like the first meeting with the new boss and everything.
Yeah.
And then you've got later on, Michael is trying to see who will take over for him, and you've got Stanley going "Arrgh!" in the
Right.
giant sumo suit, and it's like, wait, does he want more responsibility or not? Like it's very inconsistent to me.
Yeah, he's an inconsistent character. I think they kept thinking we've got to do more with him because he's such early on, the comedy from Stanley is that it's subtle and it's understated. And
Mhm.
then they tried to get him to have these bigger moments, and it's like he's a really good character with just like he's a good seasoning within the series where it's like
Yeah.
just little touches of Stanley are really, really funny. But if there's too much of a focus on Stanley, then a character who's kind of grumpy and surly and just, is he doesn't say very much, right?
Mhm.
Then it's like it doesn't work when you're trying to get him to, play a bigger role on the show.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. He is pretty much the epitome of a background character.
Yeah,
Like we were watching one episode together one time when you were like, "Did you see Stanley's face? Like he
right.
was not the point
Right.
of the whole thing that was going on. But yeah, just like the way that he just goes like he just looks
Yes,
up because he's doing his puzzle or doing
that's
work
right.
or whatever, and then he just looks up, and the look on his face is so perfect, and
Right.
it's
E-
funny, but it's a background thing. He
exactly.
can't be the the main part of it.
And that's the thing that's so great about The Office, and that's why people love rewatching the show, that it's such a rewarding show to watch again and again, because there's so many small, subtle moments of comedy embedded within one scene that you do have to watch the facial reactions of other characters when, like, you
Yeah,
can get distracted early on by seeing the dynamic between these two characters, but exactly that. Like, you look at Stanley in the background, and you're like, that's hilarious. That face that he made, that raised eyebrow is so funny.
yeah,
But it's like they felt like they had to, I say they when I'm talking about like the writers, as though they had to put him as more of a central character, but they didn't know how to do that without changing his character.
right,
And I
yeah,
don't think that you can. It's like Stanley's funny because everything he does is understated. And once it no longer becomes understated, if you let him like go for too long, like talk for too long, you're not going to get that comedy, because the comedy from him to me is funny because it's like this punctuation at the end of a long complex sentence, at the end of a long complex scene. It's like, and there's
yeah,
Stanley, right?
right.
And but if it's too much of him, I think it doesn't work.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in many ways, Stanley is a stand-in for the audience
Yeah.
for the first bit, where
Yeah.
you're having sort of the same reactions as him, where you're just like if you were there in that office, then you'd just be like, I just want to get my work done, people. Like I'm
Right.
just here to earn money
Yeah.
so that I can survive. That's
That's
it.
right.
I'm looking forward to retirement.
That's right.
And uh and yeah, he just becomes this crazy. Yeah, you're right. He does not stay
He doesn't stay that way.
normal. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
So Stanley becomes a weirdo. Phyllis so becomes a weirdo.
Oh, so weird.
I like, to the point where I can barely stand to watch Phyllis in later seasons.
I
It
agree.
it drives me crazy. She went from being this, soft-spoken, gentle woman to a sex-crazed maniac with Bob Vance, and then like apparently in, high school, she gets pregnant, she's got a baby, she was experimenting with her sexuality in college, and they kept getting her to do these things because it's like, wouldn't it be funny if you get the soft-spoken, gentle lady who's kind of very like matronly, who just sits there and likes to knit and whatever? Wouldn't it be funny if we got her to say something gross? And then we'll do it again and again and again. And it's like, it's not funny because it doesn't keep with her character.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was such a strange change with Phyllis because I love Phyllis in the early episodes.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
just
Me too.
in the early seasons. She's, I don't know. I've absolutely been in offices where, you've got somebody like that where you're just like, oh, she's so nice. And, just this, I don't know, like not old, but, just like this motherly figure
Yeah.
for the office.
Yeah.
And yeah, she just lost all of that as the seasons went on.
Yeah, like let me show you like a difference here. So early on, one of my favorite episodes, my one of my absolute favorite episodes is Office Olympics, where Jim is trying to pass the time because Michael and Dwight, they're away. Like, Michael's trying to
Yeah,
close on his.
yeah.
I feel like we like just like cut out for a little bit there.
Yeah, yeah, I'm not sure how long that was, but sorry, I missed part of that. You were talking about the Olympics.
Yeah, so it's such a great episode because I think everybody in their workplace has got something that they do to pass the time when they've got these down moments and you're trying to kill time, right? That, like,
Yeah.
I don't mean everybody, but I mean if you're in that kind of a job where it's like you are stuck there until a certain time of the day, and then you have these moments where it's just like, what am I supposed to do now?
Hmm.
Everybody comes up with these little games. So then Jim is finding all these little games throughout the office. So then they come up with Flonkerton, right? Where they have
Yes.
like the, stepping on like the paper boxes, and you strap the feet in, and then it's like, okay, we need another competitor. Who can we have? And then you just see Phyllis in the background, who's all like kind of hunched over, and then she goes, I'll do it. Right. And that's that,
Yes.
like, and it's like, like Jim's like, yeah, Phyllis stepping up, right? And then seeing how
Mhm.
she's like having a really fun time, but it's like, ooh, she's a little bit outside of her comfort zone, but she's enjoying herself. Okay, that was Phyllis. Then later on, Michael hires his nephew and then spanks him to get him out of the office. And then Phyllis is like, oh, let me bend over the desk, and Andy, spank me, take me from behind, right? Literally,
Yeah.
that's the scene. How the hell is that the same character?
Yeah, it's not.
You've got to
That's
be
it.
like, you can't, I don't see how you can enjoy both of those. You are either the kind of person who gets a lot of comedy out of like, that like, middle-aged, heavy-set woman, who you wouldn't think would be into that kind of thing, is like in front of the office, like, oh, how about you do that? Isn't this fun? It's like, if you like that kind of comedy, you don't like the, okay, I could do Flonkerton. All right, I'll try to get up. Like, you
Yeah,
don't, like, those are two totally different tones. And
yeah,
that's my issue with The Office as it goes on, is you get way more of that than you do those subtle little moments of like the minutia of like the of quotidian um things in The Office, like those just day-to-day comedic things that happen that are really subtle,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. I know Phyllis is the one that I feel so bad about because she was such a great character at the
Yeah, she
beginning.
was. She
Uh,
was.
yeah, compared to, Meredith, you've already got Meredith. Why do you have to put all this stuff that Meredith would be perfect for onto
Yep.
Phyllis?
Yep.
Like, you could do any of those things with
Right.
Meredith, and nobody would bat an eye. It would just be like, "Yep, that's Meredith for you. She's that, gross, slutty older woman who, yeah, is just who does the craziest things." That's not Phyllis.
Right.
But
But even then like Meredith, she doesn't even stay where she was at the beginning of the series, because she was basically what Phyllis becomes. But then Meredith, it's like you have to keep doing crazier and crazier things. You see like her house at the one point when Will Ferrell goes there to give her like the Dundee, and it's just like it's a shack with like the door that's open, and it's
mm,
just like the place should be condemned. And then she's coming back, and she's like, had this like crazy night out, and you see like the things that she says. Like I love the one episode, and there's a scene in the last season where she's saying all these things that people have said about her, like all these awful like insults, and then she's like, have people called me this? Yeah, this, yeah, this, yeah. Like, do you know what I'm talking about?
yeah.
And then like Pete's like, that's enough. Why does no one stop her? Right. And it's like you, and that's why I was like, I like Pete, because it's like you as an audience member are like, right. Like, how
Yeah.
how could this possibly happen within an office? Why does nobody shut her up? And the reason why nobody shuts her up is because everybody's become a caricature, except for Jim and Pam. Then everybody becomes a weirdo, and they're like, oh, this will be funny, this will be funny, this will be funny, instead of saying, wait, is this realistic office life, or is this just something that we think will be funny?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, even Jim and Pam, they get zanier.
They do. They
They
have
don't get,
moments.
full zany, but they
No,
do definitely have a lot of moments where it's just like, oh, they're not as relatable anymore. They're
no. You're right. They absolutely have got moments where they're everything in the series. Like everything, it starts here, so grounded in reality, and everything shifts over here. So it's like characters who are really, really grounded, they're not as zany, but the characters who started kind of zany and like weird, they end up way, way, way over here. That the entire thing shifts into that. And the
yeah,
ones who are most realistic don't go as far, but the entire thing moves over there. And I'd be really curious if there are people, like, I'm sure there are some, but how many people prefer the later seasons, like seasons like 5 to 10 or so of the series, compared to seasons 1 to 4? Like,
Yeah, I
because I'm saying
don't.
season 11 kind of goes back to it.
Right. Yeah, I don't know that I want to to know who those people are.
I know, right?
Yeah, no, it's I don't know. It's because the series is so good, so brilliant when it's
Sorry, it's
good.
9 seasons. So people who would
Nine
like
seasons,
seasons
yeah.
5 to 8, like, are there people who really prefer those over seasons 1 to 4?
Yeah, no, I don't know. I mean there was also the writer strike happened during the show's run, correct?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
It must
So
have.
I think that some of these things can be blamed on that, but not everything. It's
Well, I don't think it's so much that is what you get with many shows. Like The Simpsons is an example of this, or even King of the Hill does this as well. And this is why I'm really interested in Greg Daniels. It seems like as he has less involvement with these shows that he starts, the shows all become zanier. They all
mm,
do. But that's the great thing to me about what Greg Daniels brings to it is it's very grounded, very understated, very
yeah,
subtle. All those things that people say about British comedy, I'm like, you get that in American comedy in some examples of it. That's why I'm saying I don't like when people say the British version is always better because it's understated and it's, dry British wit. And I'm like, no, there's a lot of like dry humor. There's a like where characters are not trying to be funny, but they're very, very funny. Um,
yeah,
you get that. But with basically every show he's been associated with, you see the influence early on, and he gets it set up so well. But then he has less and less involvement because basically, if you, as far as I understand, you look at The Simpsons, and it's like The Simpsons, the early seasons are so great, getting up to, I don't know, I would say season. I'll be generous, maybe season 9 to 11, somewhere in there, it starts to
yeah,
go sideways.
yeah,
Um, but then you're like, oh, well, what happened? Well, all of the original writers, they went on to other projects. There are very few original writers who hung around. So you get all these new different writers. And then it's like, where did Greg Daniels go? He went and he started King of the Hill. And
right,
then King of the Hill starts going a little sideways. And I can say this as somebody who loves King of the Hill. And it's like, well, what happened with that show? Oh, Greg Daniels started The Office. The Office starts to go a little sideways. What happened? Oh, he went and started Parks and Rec.
yeah,
Right? So you see what I'm saying? And it's like even Parks and Rec, it's like more and more zany towards the end. Like not nearly as much because it's always been a little bit sillier than The
yeah,
Office.
yeah,
Um, but even that, then it's not quite as toned down as earlier seasons when you get into later seasons. And I'm pretty
mhm,
sure that's because Greg Daniels went off to go and do I don't know what he was doing at that point. But that's not uncommon to see that within any TV series is that the original writers, the original producers and creators, they have less involvement. And then it becomes kind of like what we were talking about with our Star Wars discussion, more of
yeah,
like a fan fiction approach to it. People who are fans of it who then get to play around with these characters. And it's like, wouldn't it be fun if we got the character to do this instead of
yeah,
saying, but is that consistent with the character?
right, yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, it's so the it's not just the characters who are there at the beginning who become zanier. There are so many characters that are introduced to
Yeah.
the series who are just outright zany from the start,
Yeah.
and that does not help the balance at all. Erin,
Uh-huh.
which, by the way, her name is Kelly, and they never go back to that.
Right.
Like,
Right.
they have the one episode where Charles is like, okay, I'm gonna call you Kapoor and you whatever, and then
Canon.
Hannon, right? Yeah, and then
Yeah.
she's like, "Oh, you can just call me Erin. That's my middle name." And I was
Yeah.
like, "Okay, yeah, you're Erin," but her name is Kelly, and they
Right.
never, I don't know,
Right.
like even at the end when like her birth mom shows up, then
Yep.
she's still like Erin, and like maybe she didn't name her or whatever, but still, like
Right.
nobody calls her Kelly anymore. It's so weird.
It's
Like,
Yeah, Parks and Rec at least does a better job of that, like with Gary, Jerry, Barry, right?
Yes.
Because it's very obvious, and like I really like that about Parks and Rec when you get
It's
that.
so
But yeah,
good.
but with you're right, you're absolutely right. With Aaron, then it doesn't even like come up again. But yeah, she
Yeah,
starts out as being a weirdo. Um,
right. I mean,
Andy's
she starts out more as like just this kind of dumb character,
yes.
and then she just goes way off the deep end there.
Yes, exactly. She starts, you are right. Like she starts out, but like it's not just that she's naive. It's
Mhm.
like to me, I'm like, who the hell would hire a person like that? Like,
Yeah,
like I just don't
and it was
understand.
Charles. Like,
Right. Yeah, like anyway. So you get her. Andy starts out as a weirdo. He starts out as like a toned down um form of Dwight that you get kind because I mean
right.
like it's very obvious that like Jim goes off to where did he go? He was in Connecticut, right? He was
Uh,
in
yeah, he. Oh man, I can't remember the name of the other office.
yeah. In any case, he goes off and he's working at this other branch, and then it's like you get this new character who's kind of got issues with Jim, but then Andy just gets stranger and stranger until it's just like this is not even I can't even buy this person as a human being.
Yeah, I I don't know when he like goes on his when he takes like his father's boat or his family boat, whatever, uh, and sails off to Jamaica or whatever, and then he comes back and he's wanting everybody to comment on like the beard and the weird thing that he's got in his hair and everything. And it's just like this is not I don't know. It's not Andy, and it's not,
Right.
and Andy wasn't a normal character to begin with, but
No. No.
um,
And
yeah, and he
then like what
definitely
happened?
had some anger management issues,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
really interesting to see. And then it just, I don't know, it doesn't even fizzle. It just changes the way
Right.
that he shows it, and yeah,
You're
it's
right. It really changes. Another good example of a character who totally changes is Jan. Jan
yeah,
becomes so freaking weird by the end of
yeah,
the show. Like just stranger and stranger. Like when it first starts, she's funny because basically it's a dynamic within comedy that you've got the straight man and then you've got, the one who's being silly, right? I don't
yeah.
know what the other term is. I'm sure somebody is gonna like scream at me in the comments, oh, this is the other term, you idiot. But basically, you've got like somebody who's playing the straight man, and then you've got the one who's being more overtly funny. So
Right.
you've got that lovely dynamic. Like that's like Jim and Dwight. One is
Yeah.
being very realistic, the other one is being a complete weirdo. So then it's like her interactions with Michael. Then it's like Michael's super strange, she's totally normal, and she's somehow having to interact with a totally weird character, and it's very hard to do so. Right. And that's
Yeah.
where the comedy comes from. But then she just becomes so weird in so many ways. Like
So
the
many ways.
I mean, I
So
don't even know how to start listing all of them. Just
yeah,
um,
yeah. How
another
about
one
the
who's
fact that she got Michael to to have a vasectomy and then get it reversed and then have it again and then have
yeah,
it reversed again? Like,
right,
oh my goodness.
yeah.
Just
Yeah, like when you start hearing, like when Michael starts dating her, she just becomes stranger and stranger. And then after they stop dating, then she becomes even stranger still.
yes.
Like when she
Yeah.
comes into the office with her baby and, like doing that weird, like, singing all the time, like where they start doing that with her character. She's singing all the time. And then she like makes her own, you know, like musical album of like songs that like her daughter like is singing to her, but her daughter didn't write the songs. Like, do you
And
remember?
yeah, and then she's got like her boy toy from the office who
Yeah,
makes music and she's always playing that and it's like in front of Michael and everything like when
yeah,
they are dating but it's still like
right.
she has her weird candle thing
Yeah.
um
Like when like in the last season when they're trying to get the sale from, I think, the Scranton White Pages, and then it's like they bribe her with Clark, and then it's like she's like, turn around,
Yeah.
and then she's just like, and then Clark comes back and it's like, oh, the things I did, and it's like she just becomes such a caricature. Like you
Yeah.
compare that to like the first few times that we see Jan, where she's in these business suits, she's a corporate woman, she's driven, she's focused on her career, and and then it's like what she ends up becoming, it's not the same person. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying that people can't and don't change over time, but
Yeah, I
when
was gonna
you've
bring that up
got
too.
but when you've
It's
got like 90% of the characters we meet who all trend in one direction,
yeah.
like, and then it's still supposed to be imitating the features of a documentary.
Yeah, I know. It does get, hard to watch.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
But
And so then you've got all these other characters who show up. You've got Robert California, you've
yeah.
got uh oh man, I can't even remember her name.
Oh,
The
Nelly.
yes, Nellie. Oh my goodness.
Ugh.
Nellie's so terrible.
Yeah.
Um she has no redeeming qualities. Like
No, and then it's like everyone in the office ends up embracing her, and we're supposed to, as audience members, I think we're supposed to now f- be sympathetic towards her, and it's like, no, she starts off, she's, I guess, the only one who starts off pretty zany, and then they rein her in a little bit.
yeah, yeah, I think that's true.
They rein her in because she ends up playing the straight man to Toby.
Yeah,
She does
yeah.
have a few good moments, like where she like is like telling Toby he's being so weird about the Scranton Strangler. She's like,
Right.
oh, how long are you gonna do this? Like, you're gonna like what, take a month and then buy an envelope and then like wait another month and lick the stamp, like that whole thing. Like, I'm like, well, that was actually a good scene because Toby becomes weird, so then she becomes the normal person to Toby.
Yeah.
But then by the end, she literally steals a baby and runs off to Europe. Oh, that seems realistic.
Yeah.
That's literally what happens.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
She steals
Uh
Ryan's baby.
yeah, I know. I try to forget some things like that.
I'll tell you who
um
was a character who got introduced who stayed normal though, but then it was you had Karen Filippelli.
yeah. Yeah,
She
that's
starts,
true.
yeah, but then they write her out of the show
Yeah.
because it's like, oh well, we can't have. I know that like it's because of like Parks and Rec, and that they had originally, I think, planned on having them in the same universe. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, that's my understanding, yeah. That
Yeah.
Parks and Rec was going to be just like, yeah, same, I guess, not quite the same documentary crew, but like,
But the
anyway,
same
same
town,
universe.
Parks and Rec of Scranton, instead of Pawnee, Indiana.
Mm,
Was that the
yeah.
idea?
Uh, I think so. I'm not sure, but yeah, I mean, at the very least, take place in the same universe, which was abandoned very, very quickly, or very early on, I guess.
Right.
But yeah, no, Karen, you know, she does stay normal, and even, like when they visit her later on, and they're like, "Why are you asking me that?" Like, it is like
Right.
she's still like, I'm not part of this. Like
Yeah,
she stays normal throughout that whole thing. And yeah.
exactly.
Um
I would
yeah,
also say we haven't talked about Michael, but Michael, I think he is like like Nelly, but much more so, is the only one who kind of gets reined in and becomes actually more recognizable as a real person, and we start to empathize with him. Like we really start
that's
to
true.
like and that's actually like one of the really wonderful things about The Office is what happens with Michael, because early on he is just so cringy. You see like
Yeah,
the stuff that he does and you're just like, ugh, why are you saying that? Why would you make that joke? Why would you say that to that person? And it's like so uncomfortable, but you can kind of understand. You're like, yeah, there are some weird bosses out there, and what are people supposed to do when they're interacting with their boss? But then he becomes more and more normal, and you understand a little bit more about his background, and you start to care
absolutely.
for him.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, like when he Oh, the video that he has of of him on that TV show
Yeah,
is like, talking about like how he wants kids so that he'll always have friends.
yeah,
Like you have to feel for him there,
yeah,
Like it really is like, oh, that's why he does all these things. That's why he has to be liked. That's why he's trying to be liked by everybody. He doesn't
yeah,
want to be disliked by anybody.
yeah.
And that's a compelling character. And he
Right.
doesn't start out that way, but he
No.
definitely does become that. And that's why, all the crazy things that Michael does, you are so happy for him when he, you know, for one, when he ends up with oh my goodness, I
With
am not
Holly.
remembering. Yes, thank you. I'm not remembering anybody's names today. But yeah, when he ends up with Holly, then you're like really happy because it's like, yeah, they're a perfect match for each other. And then even when he shows up in I guess it's the episode before the finale, um, uh, at Dwight and Angela's wedding. Um, and he's showing pictures of his kids, and you're like, "Aw,"
Yeah.
like you just really do have that moment of that's the perfect ending for him, like the,
Exactly. It
yeah.
it is. And it's so well written what happens with Michael with all these other characters is so poorly done, so poorly developed, but
Mhm.
his transition as a character is slow and it's subtle, uh, but it actually has got some there are very obvious reasons why it's happening, and it's because of Holly. It's
Yeah,
that he meets Holly, and it's that he does some of these zany things, and then he sees that she appreciates some of his comedy and some of his um you know I don't know, quirkiness, let's say, right? And she enjoys, she's kind of delighted by a lot of his traits that are really strange.
yeah,
But then when he goes too far, she makes it very clear, like, Michael, why would you do that? Michael, why would you say that? And
yeah,
that pulls him in where he's like, and then you see that he actually does, he apologizes and he feels guilty for it. And he realizes that it's like, oh, right, I have to actually control some of my like I have to have some inhibitions here. I have to actually, um, be careful about what I'm doing because it can really hurt people and people might take it the wrong way. And it's because he cares for her so much that he gets pulled in. But
yeah.
these other characters who become zany, there's no explanation for why they become zany.
Yeah, I know it. Like it almost feels like the the show is trying to say that zaniness is contagious.
Yeah.
It's like the more time you spend around these crazy people, the crazier you'll become. And it's like, well, but that's not. I mean, there should be some sort of balance that happens, some, overlap of some of the zaniness wearing off for some people as everybody tries to get along, if that's what you're trying to do.
Right. And most people, as they become older, become more, they become boring. They
Yes.
they
Yeah.
don't go the opposite way. Most people don't. Short of like, somebody having like a midlife crisis, then generally speaking, but even a midlife crisis, it doesn't result in some of the stuff that you see on The Office, right?
Yeah.
It's that most people they become a lot more toned down and yeah, they control a lot of those things. Um,
Yeah. Ryan is a perfect example of how they had the opportunity to, have him like he starts out as a very young character.
yeah,
Very, not quite zany, but then he becomes zany and then he gets arrested. And it's like, okay, well, that's your opportunity to redeem him, to
yes,
say, to have him be like, oh, yeah, I realize now that that's where that's going to lead me. So then he could have been pulled in, but instead he just goes even further out.
yeah,
Like,
yeah. I
it's,
wouldn't even say that he was zany when he goes to corporate. He's just like so arrogant. Like I still
yeah,
bought
yeah,
it up to that point. But then he comes out of that and it's just he's unrecognizable compared to what he was before.
yeah,
It's just he's a cartoon character after
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Um so I want to try to do a couple different things here. Did the bell already go? I don't even know. I wasn't paying attention.
No, no, it hasn't
Oh,
gone
okay.
quite
Oh,
yet.
good. We're doing well then. So,
Yeah.
um, all right. I want to know what is what's your favorite episode, or at least what are some of your favorite episodes?
Ooh. As much as I said that, that look on Stanley's face when he was in the sumo suit didn't fit his character, I love that episode where Michael is trying to find his replacement, but not because of, all the different activities that they're doing. I love it because of Pam in that episode,
Yeah.
where, her really, really trying to be. I mean, she even says it, like I've been trying to, be more open about how I feel, like make these things known.
Right.
And she very directly, points to people and asks questions to them, questions that she doesn't seem to want an answer to, rhetorical questions, but ones
Yeah.
that are meant to make the other characters think. And
Right.
it's so great because she wonders, like, why can't I be in this competition?
Yeah.
And Michael won't let her. And she comes around and she does the walking over the coals and
Right.
everything, and that was the confidence boost that she needed. And
Yes.
it's so fulfilling to see her finally, just be like, okay, yeah, no, I'm gonna say how I feel. And it's like, wow, yeah, that's great. Like, I love that.
Yes. Yeah. That is a really good episode. I agree. I really enjoy that episode. Trying to pull up the episode list on here to remind myself. Um, yeah, okay. I really do enjoy that one. And that's a good
There
example of an
we go.
that's a good example of an episode where you genuinely care for Pam. You believe all of the things that are happening. And yeah, I think to me, like I love dramedy, right?
Yeah,
I don't know how much like I know you've said before that you do enjoy romantic comedies. I'm not a big fan of romantic comedies, but I love dramedy, where it's a drama slash comedy, and depending on the percentage of which way it goes, right? Like one of like my favorite shows of all time is Northern Exposure from the early 90s, and that
right.
show is considered to be like, and I think the writers themselves or the co-creators of it then they called it a dramedy. That's the first time I've really heard the term is in relation to Northern Exposure,
Hmm.
where you get like and with Northern Exposure, I would say it's probably like 60% drama, 40% comedy. I would put
Okay.
it there. I mean I'd have to think on that. Like a pretty
Yeah.
devout Northern Exposure fan might disagree about the ratio, but or the percentage. But with The Office, I would say that it's like 80 to 90% comedy with like 10 to 20% drama, depending on the episode.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. Yeah.
Because the stuff, especially early on in those first few seasons with Jim and Pam, like those moments between Jim and Pam, there's a lot of moments there where that's just straight up drama. That's
Yeah.
not comedy. Like there's nothing funny, but you're really moved. But to me, drama has got so much more impact when there's a whole lot of comedy involved. Like where
Hmm.
because that's what makes characters charismatic, and that's what makes you care about them when you see their sense of humor, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, it's even just, you know, if you're laughing, you're smiling, and then when you have those sincere moments,
Hmm.
then you're already mentally prepared to take that in, to just be to enjoy those moments.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm sure that psychologists would be able to, or even I don't know, some kind of scientists
Right.
are able to say, exactly why that is, like endorphins or whatever. But yeah, it's very true. If if you do have, you know, a balance of comedy and drama, then that's what makes for the most compelling drama.
Right.
um, yeah, and it's yeah. I mean, I really do. I don't know. There are a lot of really good episodes, but that one really does, for some reason, just really stand out to me. You know, I mean, even when Pam like looks at Jim and says like, "I called off my wedding for you,
Yeah.
and now you come back and you're with somebody else, and you know that really stinks." Like I'm pretty sure she says like that really stinks or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
And it really is, you know, just her being honest, and it's nice to get that level of honesty and sincerity from a character in a show that, you know, otherwise at that point had started to go more zany.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I agree. I agree. Um, yeah, I really liked that episode. Um, the one I've mentioned it before, I really like Office Olympics.
right. Yes.
And I mean, even like that, like I don't just love the scenes in that episode where you've got all of these ways to pass the tedium within an office environment, but even what's happening with Michael and Dwight when you see like Michael
Yes.
really, and they come back to this theme multiple times throughout the show, but you see Michael being really aware of how short life is, how
Mhm.
lonely he is, how scared he is for the future. You get all of those moments in there where, you know, like when, you know, he starts getting scared about purchasing the condo and how long it's going to be. And, you know,
Right.
Dwight's like, you
Yeah.
know, like a 30-year mortgage at Michael's age, you know, like better, like you might as well be buying like a coffin or something along those lines, you know. And if I were,
Yeah.
I'd buy one with thicker walls, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then, but then he comes back to the office, and then they have like the closing ceremonies, and then you see how moved Michael is because he gets that little sense of community within the office, and he's brought to tears by this.
Yeah.
And it's that lovely pairing where you've got what was happening in between your A storyline, your B storyline, and they come together so well.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I know. Because, like, you know, Michael and Dwight walk in, and then Jim is absolutely like, wait, where's everybody going? You didn't get your medal yet, or
right,
whatever. And, like, him seeing that, you know, oh, nobody really cares about these things. Like, they don't even want to hold on to the memories, you know, by
right,
them, like, literally, like, throwing away the medals.
yeah,
Um, and then him being able to give this closing ceremony, um, you know, kind of letting everybody know, like, yeah, I get it. We're done with this, but like, this is a good moment, and we're all, you know, we all had this experience. Let's not forget it. And
right.
being able to bring Michael into that is really great because he sees that Michael is, you know, hurt and needs a little pick me up, which is
Exactly.
exactly what the Olympics were supposed to be.
Right. And that's where the office is at its strongest. It's when, and I've mentioned this to you before, but like not within this recording, but the absolute best moments of the office are when you have both Jim and Michael experiencing similar things, except Jim is experiencing it on a much more profound level, and Michael's experiencing it on a much more shallow level. So
Right.
when, you know, like Michael's going through like a breakup with you know, whoever, I forget, like the real estate agent,
Hmm.
where he's actually married to her in real life, the actress.
Right.
I forget her name. Um, but
Carol?
yeah, Carol, that's it.
Yeah.
You know, and like
I
Jim is
remembered a
like,
name.
hey, all right. And then Jim is going through, you know, these difficult moments with Pam, and you're like, yeah, but like what Jim has with Pam is so much bigger. Like it's so deep, it's
Mhm.
so profound. And it's like what Michael has with Carol is like it's really shallow. It's just temporary thing. But for Michael, he doesn't see it that way, right?
Yeah.
And that they're often going through these things where it's like they're feeling the same thing, but the complexity and the depth of their emotions are totally different. Where Jim is like whoosh, way deep down, like what he's going through and how tough it is for him. And for Michael, it's much more shallow, but it's a similar feeling. And when the show brings those two things together, then it is at its absolute best. It's really brilliant when you get those moments.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it really does feel not to get overly religious about this, but it does feel like God gives you as much as you can handle. Like
Yeah,
that line where it's like Michael could not handle something that's as deep as what Jim is going through, but
right.
because of who Jim is and because of who Michael is, they each have their own ways of figuring out those same, like going through those same experiences and having those
Exactly.
same emotions.
Exactly. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think of a really good example of this, of like when this comes up. Um, I'm not. I know that we've talked about them before, but I can't
Mhm.
think of one off the top of my head. But you get a lot of these moments in there in the series where you see that both Michael and Jim, they are dealing with the same emotion or the same experience in life,
Yeah,
just on very, very different levels. And when those two things come together and you realize that when you're watching the episode, you're like, oh, you were exploring the same theme in both your A and B storyline, and it doesn't become obvious until the end or until you watch the episode again. Can you think of
right.
an example? Because I know I pointed out several to you before.
Um, at the moment, I'm just thinking about that episode where Jim becomes Michael for a day, like unintentionally becomes Michael.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
Michael comes back and goes through like all the stuff with him where it's like, oh yeah, I tried doing all the birthdays on one day before. That was a disaster. Give it a few years
Right.
and you'll
You'll
figure it
learn.
out. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Um,
And
yeah, I'm
I
gonna,
don't remember what Michael's story was for that episode, but I'm just remembering like that one moment.
yeah. Um, I'm trying to think here. But yeah, you do get maybe it's not the best example, but um in any case, uh, let me go over another I as far as other episodes that I really enjoy. I don't know why, but I love the Christmas episodes of The Office. Like multiple
Oh
ones.
man, Yankee swap.
Yeah, Benihana's Christmas when they do that one as well.
Oh
I
yes.
I think what I like about the Christmas episodes is that it, it's still taking place within the office, so it makes sense why they're still filming, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
But and I know that like this happened. I'm pretty sure it's Greg Daniels who kept telling writers early on, because writers kept pitching these ideas in the writers' room, and they would say, "Well, why don't we do this?" And then he's like, "But that's not in the office. Why would they be filming that?" And it's like, "Well,
Right.
why don't we have this scene? Why don't we have this scene? Why don't we have this scene?" He's like, "No, it's a documentary. Like it has to all be justified of why the crew is there." And
Yeah.
so you get to see them not working, where they're trying to interact socially, but they're doing this at a work party in the office. And so you get a whole bunch more of free reign with the characters within those episodes, where they're not just at their desk, they're moving around from one part of the office to the other,
Yeah.
and the normal rules don't apply. And I really enjoy those episodes. I think for those reasons, and also because if anybody's gone to a work party before, then I mean, like the Office episodes, they just capture it so well. Of like, some people don't understand that this is still a professional environment, and they do stupid stuff. And like, I mean, invariably, like, and you hear about this happening all the time. People go to work
Yep.
parties and they get drunk and they do something stupid, and it's like, what are you doing? This is still a professional environment. And The Office it does such a great job of showing that. Of like, you've got these characters who don't know how to behave in this kind of situation.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I, it's true. Like, you do have because they're not in the regular workday structure, then you do get the opportunity to have more interactions between characters who otherwise wouldn't be interacting, which I feel in later seasons they just drop all subtext and are just like, yeah, he just went over to his desk for no reason or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, it's yeah, I agree. I think that those episodes are very good. And of course the Dundies.
The Dundies are fun, and those make sense too. See, like as similarly with like they're similar to the Christmas episodes, where
Yeah,
it's like you're seeing them in this social environment, but it makes sense why the crew is still there. That this is
right.
still a work function, but it's a work function outside of the office. Um,
Yeah,
I've always
yeah,
liked that one, the Dundies episodes. I like the client episode a fair bit. Like I actually really, really like that one. That's early on where Michael and Jan they meet with the guy who works for I think it's for the county office for Lackawanna County, right? Then like they meet him at the Chili's because like
yes,
Michael
yeah,
insists on this, and like that episode is it does such a great job of showing how can a weird person like Michael how did he ever get this job? I love those moments when you see him actually being good at his job, and he
yeah,
does it in such an unorthodox way where
yeah,
Jan is so direct to the point and she's like, here's what we're offering. Here and then you've got the client who's there in the Chili's and it's like he's not responding very well to this. And then Michael just wants nothing to do with business talk, you
yeah,
know? Let's get some awesome blossoms, like let's sing like the Chili song about like the ribs and
yeah.
phoning Pam to get like his joke book to give him some good jokes to say. And
Yeah,
like they
no,
all
that
get
one is so good.
yeah.
I mean, it also, does double duty of having Jan have more appreciation for Michael, which is,
Right.
yeah,
And as a stand-in for us, then we start to see that. We're like,
yeah,
oh, okay, so he does things in a really unorthodox way, but he ultimately is better at his job than anybody else would be because you could see that with this particular client, he's not going to respond to a straightforward
right.
approach.
Yeah,
That Jan is doing the totally corporate approach of here's what we're offering, here's what your needs are, let's discuss, let's negotiate. And Michael's just like, let's not do any of that stuff and builds this relationship with this guy. And then by the end of it, when there's this natural moment in the conversation where Michael's like, I grew up in Lackawanna County or in Scranton, I know how many schools we have, I know how many hospitals we have. This is what the big corporations are going to do. They come in, they undercut our prices, then like they drive us out of business, jack them up. And then he's like, and then he even cuts off like Jan because Jan starts to, and he's like, he kind of does this little motion of
yeah,
like, no, 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 I got this. And
yeah,
then like, and that's when like him and Jan, they like kiss afterwards. And but that's like it so naturally follows what happens of she's
yeah,
like caught up in all this and she's also been drinking. You find out that she's, gone through this divorce that you didn't know about beforehand. Everything comes up naturally. I think that episode's just so well done.
yeah, absolutely. Um, so you brought up the crew who's filming. I'm curious as to your thoughts on when the one cameraman comforts Pam,
Mm.
because I mean that it to me then uh it doesn't it breaks the fourth wall of
It
you
sure
know
does.
you just being like, oh, there really are people there filming it, but it also it really does it to me. Then it really it works pretty well because you are watching it and just going like, oh, well, yeah, if these people are watching all these things, why are they letting them happen? And of course, they're not allowed to interfere, but there's gonna be, that one person who's just like, no, I can't, I can't just let this happen. Like, we can't just be filming. We need
Yeah.
to, and I mean that's something that, documentarians do struggle with. When do you decide to stop filming the event and become a part of it? Um,
Yeah. That's a really good point. And that is a really interesting um element in the series when that does come up. I think for me, I've had a hard time with it, in part because this was my frustration. I'm not saying that this doesn't come up within marriages that you don't get, because ultimately what ends up happening is you start having. Pam and then the camera guy, where there's this, like, he obviously is interested in her, and then
mhm.
I mean, the idea of infidelity, it's like, well, obviously that's a real thing that does come up in marriages, but to me it felt contrived, everything
Yeah,
about that. Not just the cameraman, but then when you get that new girl in the office where she goes away, with everybody to Tallahassee when Jim is there, and then she tries to seduce him, and then it's like, I liked Jim's response to that because I felt like that was a very Jim response.
yeah,
um, but it felt to me like they had no clue what on earth to do with Jim and Pam, how to get any drama from them once they became a couple. And it's like, well, they become a
yeah,
couple. Okay, well, then we'll, like, and it's such a sitcom thing. Okay, well, after they get married, then they'll have kids, and then we'll get the drama associated with them having children. But that only lasts for so long. And especially
mhm,
in an office environment, you can't show a lot of that. So then they're
yeah,
like, what else can we do? And it was like the most obvious um possible plot element that they could do, which was, oh, let's bring up, a third party into their relationship. Let's introduce the fear that what if they don't last because of infidelity. And it just,
right.
to me, it just felt so contrived. Like, you guys are trying to generate drama from our main couple within the series. And I just didn't like it for that reason. Not because I'm saying that you can't explore that theme, but it just felt just so like, ugh, this, I can see the strings all over this. I can
Yeah,
see how you're trying to manipulate me as a viewer.
yeah. No, I agree. I think that they do a better job when Jim is uh, getting interested in this business with his friends. That's a more
Yes.
interesting way of having it be
Yeah.
like, oh, well, are they going to last? Because now they're separated and there's all this financial strain
Yeah.
and
Totally.
all that. That works way better. And I
And that
agree.
they have, yeah. Go
I
ahead.
don't like that actually he's not the cameraman. I forgot. He's the boom operator,
Right.
right?
You are right. Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't like that I like the moment of him comforting Pam because
Yep.
that feels real and genuine. But then when they're like, oh, who knows what happens when, you spend that much time working next to this person for all this time, and they're showing all these behind the scenes shots of
Yep.
the boom operator like watching her like all the
Yes. And
time
falling
and
in love with her. And
yeah,
yeah.
that like was just like too much for me where I was
Yeah.
like, like again, like I think that it's a really interesting aspect to have one of the crew members interfere in this thing that they are documenting,
Yes.
but it does feel contrived to have it be this infidelity subplot that doesn't really
Yes.
go anywhere. And I don't know, like when like he uses the boom to like hit somebody in the face. I forget
The
who it
guy
is.
from the warehouse where he, like, drew all over
Right.
Pam's,
Yeah.
like, art wall. Yeah.
Yeah, that I was like, that felt like you didn't have a good way of getting out of that situation of Pam and this warehouse guy having some conflict, saying you just had, like Deus Ex Machina.
Yes, yeah, you see what I'm saying? That it, like, the whole thing, that entire thing
Yeah,
felt contrived. But
yeah,
when you bring it up, like when you started bringing it up, I was like, yeah, you are right. That is a really interesting part of the series, and that does actually, because doing this mockumentary approach to a television series, not a movie, right? Because like there's been mockumentaries like the Christopher Guest films going back to the 1980s with like This Is Spinal Tap, for instance.
Right.
Then so that it's not like this has never been done before, but as far as in a TV series over this extended period of time, then it is a really interesting element to explore. I just don't like how they explored it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. It
So
is always a sequence that I I appreciate the pulling down the curtain, like
yeah, yeah.
peeking behind the curtain, but it is the way that they do it. It's just kind of awkward and yeah, because I mean you get enough of it um Pam and the boom operator are like whatever they say like we've gone to dinner, like the couples have gone on double dates together and everything,
Right.
so it's like, oh well, that's I don't know that that would be allowed in this
Right.
documentary thing.
Right.
um but again, that was just like more of like setting up that Pam and Jim are having trouble, so is the boom operator and his wife, and
Yeah.
is something gonna, and obviously nothing was gonna happen there.
Right.
It
I know.
really does, like you got the sense that like that's not what's going to break up Jim and Pam.
I know. It was clumsy. It was
Yeah.
like it was just such an like obvious attempt to, you know, manipulate us as viewers where it's like, well, we got to keep them watching. We got to generate drama somehow. So let's do it in like the most ham-fisted way possible. And I just yeah, I didn't care for it. So can I jump back to because I came up with a really good example of
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
okay. So this actually explains why I like the episode The Client so much. So going back to that episode, that's I don't know if that's the A or B storyline, but I think that's the A storyline. In any case, doesn't really matter. That you've got that whole thing going on at Chili's between Michael and Jan and the client. I forget what his name is, but that's really Michael and Jan's first date. Okay.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's their first date in a work environment, except their relationship ultimately is like there's no real sexual tension between them up to this point. There's nothing really profound about their relationship. It's not, and even once they start dating, then it's a pretty shallow thing.
Mhm.
But for Michael, he feels like it is the most significant um, thing in the world, right? That this is like a love for the ages. Okay,
Yeah.
watch what happens in the B storyline in this episode, though. It is when they find Jim. I think it's Jim who finds Michael's script, Threat Level Midnight, and then all of the office workers they stay around in the conference room and they act it out. They have a table reading of this, and then they take this little intermission. And like, remember, like Roy, he comes in to Pam and he's like, "Hey, like, what are you doing?" She's like, "Oh, I gotta work late." He's like, "This? Like, you gotta be kidding me! This is like work, right?" But like, they stay late, so it's still a work situation. Just like Michael and Jan, they're off at this dinner in a work situation, and then they
Right.
take an intermission, and then Jim goes up to the roof with Pam, and then they're watching like the fireworks, and they've got the chairs, and he like cooks her the grilled cheese sandwich, and then he even says afterwards that that was like their first date, because then
Yeah.
afterwards, then like they've got like they listen to music and they kind of sway together in the parking lot, and it's like. Oh, there's all kinds of romance going on there where it's like it's culminating in this really natural moment. And so it's like Michael and Jan's first date, Jim and Pam's first date. One of them is like going like a mile deep for how significant this is. The other one is
Yeah.
really shallow, but they're doing it at the same time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that is a great episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, just brilliant writing there.
Yeah, it's so brilliant. Like that is really like that is just one of that's why I really love that episode and I love those early seasons of The Office because you get
Mhm.
that a lot. And I don't know, sometimes I wonder about this with series creators and head writers of shows, how they often will leave after a number of seasons. You know, they'll get it going, it becomes a big, huge success. And then of course the network wants it to keep going for however many
Yeah.
seasons because they're going to make tons of money from ad revenue. But
Yeah.
then often that head writer or creator of the show leaves. They usually have got like some executive producer role or something like that, where,
Yeah.
they're still kind of associated. They're collecting checks, but they're not doing a hell of a lot as far as I understand. As far as like
Yeah.
the day to day, right? Like they're not in like the
Right.
writer's
Yeah.
room, they're not working on the scripts and all of that, that they're still sort of associated, but
Yeah.
not that directly. That I wonder how many of them just know that there's nothing left here. There's no good ground to go over. That we've done everything that you can do that's going to be high quality. It's time to leave.
Yeah.
And how much of that is like networks just taking advantage of it afterwards, and then you're getting, I don't know, what do you think about that?
Uh, yeah, I mean it's interesting because a lot of a lot of people will say that like, oh, the series just ran out of ideas. And they don't talk about the writers involved. And
Yeah.
for the majority of shows, then the writers change over time. And
Yes.
it's the shows that are able to give a satisfying conclusion are are so much better, even when it only runs for a few seasons. Then you
Yes.
leave it and you're just like, yeah, but now I can rewatch it and enjoy all of it.
Right.
Uh, as opposed to The Office, where I'm like, well, I don't know what point I should stop watching
Yep.
because the story keeps going, and I like seeing, where
Yeah.
Jim and Pam end up
Yes.
and all of
Exactly.
that. So I think that it's it is true that I think so that yeah, like the head writers or whoever do, but not necessarily that they're like that they realize that they've exhausted all the story ideas, but just that they're like, I don't see any in terms of story arcs. I
Yep.
think that's where they have to figure out a point where it's like, yeah, I told the story that I wanted to tell,
Exactly.
and I did have an ending in mind, but they wouldn't let me do it now.
Right.
So then you're still left with not a not a very satisfying, you know, conclusive moment to split with the series. So yeah.
Yes, exactly. And yeah, that's really interesting to me because it brings up this whole really big question of show business versus show art, which,
Yeah.
we've talked about before, that the networks, they do have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders to continue being profitable. And if they can see a way that they can continue being profitable, then even if it's like, yeah, we're going to be making an inferior product from now on, that the show is not going to be what it used to be, but we don't really have much choice because we're in a business here. It's
Right.
not, we're not doing this just purely for artistic reasons. And then it's tough because there are plenty of TV series that get to a very satisfying conclusion, but they often are much shorter, where they don't
Yes.
go for 9 seasons or 10 plus seasons. And
Yeah.
it does, as you're saying, it does bring up a really interesting um, question for viewers who end up coming into the show loving, certain characters. And it's like, well, I feel committed to these characters, but I'm just so frustrated by so many other elements of this show, and I don't quite know what to do. When do I stop following along?
Yeah. Yeah. It's I mean I ask myself that question all the time with different shows. Once Upon a Time, I thought was a really interesting show, but it felt like they, stretched it out so that it could be more seasons than it needed to be. And
Hmm.
then at the end of, I think it's the end of the seventh season, whatever the second last one is, then it comes to a very clear end.
Yeah.
And like all the characters are their stories are all done. Then they did another season, and they only did one other season, and it followed the kid from the original
Mm.
series, all grown up, and his kid. and like it gets really, really weird, and it's a completely different story. And I'm just like I mean, even having said that, like they extended those last few seasons longer than they needed to be, then it was still like, okay, well, yeah, I can have this one point where I can say I'm done with the series at this season. But they end that episode with the tag or teaser or whatever you want to call it of the beginning of the next season. And it's like,
Mm,
but you didn't need that. Like and I mean, they did need it because they need to get people to watch the next season. And a lot of people, like me, would have said, "Oh, I'm going to be done after this story," and then other people will say, "Oh, well, yeah, now I know where the story's going next, and I want to see what happens." I personally was like, "No, I'm not having any of that." But
right.
uh, but yeah, so you do have some shows that kind of try to write around it and give audiences good points uh, to end, but those are few and far between.
They really
Um,
are. And the few shows that do come to a pretty satisfying conclusion, it's usually because the creator of the show or the head writer stays on and then
yeah,
decides when it's going to end. I mean, like even within like the sitcom world, the amount of people who were frustrated. I mean, even me, I was fairly young at the time, but I was disappointed by this. Were frustrated by the end of it was Seinfeld, right? And
mm,
Jerry
yeah,
Seinfeld has been very open about this. He has said like it was the number one show on television. It when he said this is it, we're done. This is going to be our last season, and people are like, but why? Why are you going to end Seinfeld when most people felt like Seinfeld was just as strong, if not stronger, than at any point in the series? I think like the last several seasons of Seinfeld are better than the first couple seasons, at least the
yeah.
first season, which I find like the first season is a little clunky, I think.
Mm.
But boy, once Seinfeld hits its stride, it's great. But Jerry Seinfeld decided, he said this like many times, that he wanted to end the series when it was on top. He didn't want it to decline in quality. That
Yeah.
he was like, well, this is as good as it gets. We're going to stop. And people were like, what are you talking about? The amount of money you're walking away from? And he knew he was walking away from an incredible amount of money. But all that, but like ultimately, when you're looking at this like 20 years later, Seinfeld gets to hold his head high and say, I've made this show that I'm really proud of, and that you can't say that I stayed on too long, that it petered out or fizzled out into, a pretty crummy product, like a shadow of what it once was, that you can
Yeah.
say, we ended strong, and we started strong, we ended strong, we stayed strong the entire time, and I chose to end it when I was ready to end it. But with The Office, then you know like, or even like The Simpsons, I think is just such a great example of a show where you've got to uh, who on earth is there any human being who started watching in season one who's still watching? Like,
I don't know. I feel like even Matt Groening is not watching at this
I don't think
point.
he watches it.
Yeah, I mean he even has his opinion of where the series uh went off the rails. He has a specific episode.
Okay, I don't want to get too far into that, but I
Yeah,
definitely want to
yeah.
know what was the episode.
That was the one with Armin Tamzarian.
Oh, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, we should have a Simpsons talk about this. But like The Simpsons
Yeah.
is a show where I stopped watching. I can't remember where, but somewhere around probably season 14. And what are they? Aren't they into like season 30 at this point?
I think so. Yeah. And I think
So
they've
I
been renewed up through season 32. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
and so I look at this and it's similar to Star Wars, where I think you got a lot of fans who are like, oh, I came along up to this point, but I'm leaving now, right? And
Yeah.
it's like with The Simpsons, then it's I don't know what to do with that, because I don't even know if I count as a Simpsons fan when I legitimately have seen less than 50% of the show.
Right. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
The
No, I
Office,
agree.
yeah. But The Office, I think that a good 40% of it is so brilliant. And then it's got enough moments in the later seasons, and Jim and Pam,
Yeah.
even though they do migrate towards zany, I think that there's enough of them left over, and that I genuinely care for them as characters, that I want to see it through. And I certainly cared more and more about Michael as the series went on,
Yeah. Yeah.
until he leaves the show. And then it was kind of like, well, now what do we do? And that was a whole like mess. They sure didn't know what to do with no Michael, with
Oh my
without
goodness.
having Steve
Yeah.
Carell.
The Will Ferrell episode is dreadful. Just
Everything with the manager from that point forward. Will
yeah.
Ferrell was just terrible. You get the Robert California thing where he's not even exactly the manager, right? Because then Andy becomes the manager.
Right. Because he promoted Robert California convinced the owner of the company
Yeah.
to give him her job. I don't.
Yep. The CEO
Uh,
to be CEO of like
yeah.
Joe Bennett. He convinced her. Yeah, because he's
Yeah.
this like super weird character. I mean, I found like Robert California was an interesting character, but not for The Office. Like I like
Right.
him as a character. He's fun because
Oh
he is
yeah.
so weird. But
Yeah,
I'm
he could
like, but that's
absolutely have a show like on AMC. I could see something like that.
oh yeah,
Something like Better Call Saul or something, but
right.
yeah, just him in the business world. I would watch that
Yeah,
probably.
me too. Because I really like him as a character, but I don't like him as a character on The Office.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then yeah, they like had Andy in there, and then because what's his name? The what's the actor's name who plays Andy? I can't believe I can't
Oh,
remember this.
uh,
Ed
oh my,
something. Ed
Ed
Helms.
Helms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Ed Helms, of course, had to leave multiple times to go and do the Hangover films. I'm assuming
Right.
that's why he wasn't there. That's why they wrote him out of the show for extended periods of time. Is that he's filming the Hangover movies, and then like
Yeah.
and then you get Nelly who
That's
comes to
the
place.
thing, really. Like you can feel that he's missing for those extended periods of
Yeah,
time for some reason, and it like the fact that you can tell that they
yeah.
wrote him out for that those portions of time is really dissatisfying.
It is. It's
Um,
awkward, and it's I think it's an interesting gender question, because it's a whole lot easier to write out a woman for a female actress for a period of time, like especially if she's right age, because you say that she's having a baby, right? Like what
right.
they
Yeah.
did with Jenna Fisher, where as far as I understand that she legitimately was pregnant,
Right.
because like I said, I mean she sure looked pregnant.
Yeah.
Like I think that she in real life got pregnant, and then it's like, well, you just incorporate that into the show. And then she
Yeah.
wasn't there for several episodes. I think it was a couple times where she wasn't there. And it's like, because she on the show, Pam was staying at home with the kids, and in real life, then Jenna Fisher, she's had children. But then like, how do you write out Andy? Ed Helms, oh, he's going on a boat trip. Sure, that makes sense.
Yeah, it was really bad. And then like, oh man, the tension with him and Aaron slash Kelly, it
Yeah, and
was
that
just so
was,
weird.
to me, that was such an overt reference to, like, it was like a stand-in for Michael and Jan,
Mm,
right? Where it's just like, oh, okay, well, we'll have, you know, we don't have that on the show anymore. We don't have Michael and Jan and this whole, shallow relationship compared to Jim and Pam. So you need to have another shallow relationship in comparison to Jim and Pam. So then they try to bring up like Andy and Aaron. And it was just, I don't think any of those were interesting. I think because they're both weird.
yeah, well, I mean, honestly, it like when I rewatched it, then like it really feels like Aaron is just going to be with whoever. Um,
Yeah.
and not that she's slutty, but that she's just looking to anybody to be
Yes.
like you have Dwight hitting on her,
Yep.
uh you have Andy, you have oh my goodness, a tall lanky guy.
I know. What's the character's name? Oh, that's gonna drive me crazy.
He's so
Um,
forgettable, and everybody knows that he's so forgettable, and that's the joke in the series. And now I'm forgetting.
I know. I'll get it. Don't worry. I'm on this.
Does
But
anyone even
yes,
remember that I'm here? Okay, Gabe. It's Gabe.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you have oh man, who else do you have? You have Dwight, Andy,
Gabe.
uh, Gabe, um,
And then Pete.
and then Pete. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. It's so weird. There were just so many. I don't know. It feels like they were just like, oh, she's a woman. She needs to end up with somebody. And it's like,
I know. And
uh,
they just kept pairing her and trying to get comedy from the relationships. And I don't think there's a lot of comedy to be found there. And I don't think there's a
yeah,
lot of drama to be found there. So,
yeah,
insofar as The Office is, I think, trying to be a dramedy, it's like, well, you're not getting either drama or comedy because she's too quirky. She's too unrealistic as a character to really have a lot of drama there. But then she I don't think you get a lot of comedy from these scenes either.
yeah, yeah. I mean, well, part of the issue is she is an underwritten character. Like, she
Hmm.
just doesn't have much to her. You can say that she's quirky, but it's like, well, what even are her quirks?
Yeah, you know what it is? She's a two-dimensional character that they're featuring.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
she's very much like it's kind of like what we were talking about at the beginning of this with Stanley, of making him a much more prominent character, but it's like, but who is he beyond he likes crossword puzzles, he just wants to go in there, do his work and get out. And he doesn't
Right.
care that much about the job and he's trying to deal with a weird boss. And it's like Erin is the same kind of thing. It's like you're really heavily featuring her, but she's so two-dimensional.
Yeah, and I mean, it feels like that like she was written into the series initially to be sort of a one-off joke
Yeah.
character.
I thought she was going to be another one of those, like the secretary that they had in there, Ronnie. Do you remember this? When
Oh, I
Ronnie
don't
was like,
remember Ronnie.
she was like, I don't know, like about the same age as Phyllis. She
Oh
was on
yes,
for
yeah,
one episode, and then
I
it's
do remember.
maybe it
Yeah,
was two episodes, and then they got rid of her. And I thought that Erin was going to be another one of those characters where it's like we'll just have
yeah,
a rotating thing of secretaries. You know, even
yeah,
Ryan was a secretary for a couple episodes,
yeah.
at least one
Kevin.
episode. Kevin was, yeah. Like I thought that could have
That
been.
was at least funny.
Yes, exactly. Your call is very important to us. Please hold. Yeah,
But
Kevin.
then oh man, that was such a great joke, but then it ended off with such a weird like punchline of Andy being like, "My maid died." And you're like, "You have a maid? What the
I know it was such a like to me that's such a poorly written joke because it's just like it's not it's like this whole idea of like he's upset about it, but you're like I have a lot of I have a hard time sympathizing with somebody who has a maid. Like, what is that
Yes.
relationship between like a wealthy, you know, single 30-something guy and his maid?
Yeah.
Like,
If he had said aunt, then it would have been like, okay, I can buy that a little bit more.
I
Like this
think you
is
could have appreciated the joke. It's like they were trying to do too much with that joke,
yeah.
right? It's like,
Yeah.
oh, it's funny because it was this sad call that he got. And so everybody's out there celebrating and they're so happy that Kevin was able to transfer the call. But then it's like, let's juxtapose that with this sad moment. But then it's a sad moment that also is like, wait, what? You
Yeah.
also have got a maid, and it's like, and then you're like, you're such a, trust fund kid, you know?
Yeah.
Where
Yeah, it's
you
like two different jokes put together, like
yeah.
and it just does not work.
No, it
It's
doesn't.
really sad because it's got such a great setup of Kevin
It
transferring this
does. It's a
call all the
great
way
setup.
around the office.
And then it turns into that. I know
Yeah.
that the chances of this are zero, but if there's a Hollywood producer out there who is watching this, do you not see we can punch up a script right here? We can do
Yes.
this. Hire us to punch up a script because we love that setup and we just walk you through exactly what's wrong with that joke.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Aspiring screenwriter here. It's
Yeah. Yeah, no
Yep.
kidding. Do you want to say like we're done for now?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously, there are 9 seasons
Yeah,
of The Office. This is not going to be an exhaustive talk about it, but we've said a lot.
I think so. I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like we're coming up on 2 hours now. So
Right. I've got other things to do with my life. So as much as I like this, I'm like, I legitimately have got things to do.
Yeah, I know.
Besides this. This is important, but besides this.
Yeah, we said that we would try to keep this short, but I think we failed
failed.
there.
We failed.
At least we didn't add extra padding that didn't need to be there like The
No.
Office did.
Exactly. We didn't introduce any weird new characters. I don't think we became zanier as this went on.
No, I don't think so. Yeah, we're all right. Well, thanks for watching.
Yeah, thanks so much for watching. All right, bye.
Ignore the bell, people. We're gonna keep going. We're still ignoring it. Don't worry. I don't know what that. I think that's the fire drill. All right, we're gonna go home. Yeah. All right, we're done.